If there's one thing most people can agree on, it's that forests can feel off. Maybe it's the overwhelming silence. Maybe it's the strange sounds that seem to come from nowhere. Or maybe it's that lingering feeling, the one you can't shake, that something is watching you. Now picture being alone in a cabin, deep in the woods. No neighbors. No cell service. Just you, and whatever else might be out there. These stories don't have monsters or made-up creatures. They're real accounts, told by the people who live them, people who still don't fully understand what happened. So turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and get ready to step into the kind of place no one should be alone in. Story 1, The Knock That Never Came Back. My name is Caleb, and this happened 5 years ago when I stayed at a small rental cabin deep in the woods, about a 2-hour drive from the nearest town. I had taken a week off work to disconnect from everything, no phone, no internet, just me and nature. The cabin was simple, a small kitchen, 1 bedroom, and a front porch facing a quiet stretch of forest. The first 2 days were uneventful. I hiked, read books, made food over a fire pit. But on the 3rd night, something changed. It was around 11 p.m., and I was inside reading by lantern light when I heard 3 slow, deliberate knocks on the cabin door. I froze. There was no car nearby, no sign of anyone else for miles. I hadn't seen a soul since I'd arrived. I stood up, heart pounding, and quietly walked to the door. I didn't open it, just looked through the small peephole. No one was there. I waited a full 5 minutes before unlocking the door and stepping outside with my flashlight. I swept the beam across the trees, the dirt path, the empty space in front of the porch. Nothing. No footprints in the soft dirt. No rustling in the trees. I went back inside and locked everything. That night, I barely slept. But nothing else happened. The next evening, I heard the knocking again, same pattern, same time. 3 slow knocks. Again, no one outside. On the 5th night, I decided I'd try something. I sat on the couch, facing the door with the lights off. Just waiting. At exactly 11 p.m., the knocks came again. This time, I jumped up and yanked the door open immediately. Nothing. But this time, something felt wrong. The air was heavier, like pressure building up in my ears. I felt lightheaded and nauseous. I stepped onto the porch, and for a brief second, I had the overwhelming sensation that someone was watching me, from everywhere at once. I left the cabin the next morning. To this day, I don't know who, or what, was knocking. But I know this, whatever it was, it never wanted to come in. It just wanted me to know it was there. Story 2, The Window That Shouldn't Have Been Open. My name is Morella. Last fall, I rented a small off-grid cabin with my boyfriend, Evan. It was the kind of place you hike into, about 30 minutes from where we parked. Beautiful and isolated. The cabin had 1 front door, a few windows, and a single loft bed above the main room. We had a small wood stove for heat and used solar-powered lights. The first night was peaceful. We drank wine, played cards, and fell asleep early. The second night, I woke up at around 3 a.m. The room was cold. I figured the fire had gone out, so I climbed down to restart it. When I reached the ground floor, I noticed something weird. One of the side windows was open. Wide open. I was sure we had locked all of them. In fact, I remember checking them before bed. I closed it, latched it tight, and relit the fire. Then I went back to sleep. The next morning, Evan mentioned he'd had a dream that someone was standing outside the window, staring in. He brushed it off, but it made me uneasy. That night, we locked everything again. Double-checked it. Even wedged sticks into the window frames. Still, at 3 a.m., the same window was open. Same one. This time, I woke Evan up. We both searched the cabin, then the area outside with flashlights. No footprints. No signs of forced entry. Nothing. The following night, we didn't sleep. We sat up, lights off, staring at that window. It opened again. But we heard it this time. A slow, deliberate creak, like someone pushing it up from the outside. We jumped up and ran to it. Nothing there. Just the dark woods staring back. We left before sunrise. We never figured out how that window kept opening. There was no wind, no animals, no tracks. Something just wanted it open. Story 3, The Cabin with No Reflection. My name is Lars. A few years back, I went to photograph abandoned cabins deep in the forest for a small indie project. I found one cabin that felt different. It wasn't on any maps. It looked like no one had been there in decades, but it wasn't falling apart either. Just untouched. When I stepped inside, everything was covered in a thin layer of dust. Furniture intact, dishes still in the sink, even a coat hanging near the door. But what really freaked me out was the mirror. It was a tall, old mirror in the corner of the main room. But when I looked into it, I didn't see myself. I saw the room, the furniture, the walls, but I wasn't there. I thought it was just dirt or angle distortion. I stepped closer. Still nothing. Then I waved my hand. Nothing moved in the reflection. Suddenly I felt this coldness on my back. Like someone breathing right behind me. I turned around. Nothing. But when I looked back at the mirror, there was something now. A blurry shape standing exactly where I'd just turned. I left everything behind and ran. I've gone back to that area twice since then. I can never find that cabin again. It's like it was waiting to be seen once, and only once. Story 4, The Whispering Fog. My name is Tasha. I went camping with a friend near a series of remote cabins that you could rent for cheap if you booked far enough in advance. We stayed for a weekend in October. One morning, we woke up to thick fog all around us. It wasn't just misty, you couldn't see more than a few feet. We stayed inside the cabin most of the day, waiting for it to clear. Around dusk, we both started hearing things. Whispers. At first, I thought it was the wind moving through the trees. But then it became clearer. Voices. Low, soft, like they were just outside the walls. Neither of us wanted to go out and check. That night, the fog got thicker. The cabin felt like it was floating in it. The whispers got louder. We heard footsteps crunching leaves. Something brushed against the door. I tried looking through the window, but the fog was too dense. I put my ear to the wall and swear I heard someone say my name. We packed before sunrise and left the cabin in the dark, with our flashlights barely piercing through the haze. We never figured out where the voices were coming from. And I've never seen fog that thick since. It wasn't natural. Story 5, The Man Who Wasn't There. My name is Theo. I went on a solo retreat last summer to work on a manuscript. The cabin was about an hour into the forest. No neighbors. No distractions. 3 days in, I started seeing someone. Just glimpses, a man walking between trees, always far off. He wore dark clothes. Tall. Thin. I assumed it was a hiker. But every time I looked again, he was gone. One afternoon, I saw him closer. Standing just on the edge of the clearing. Staring at the cabin. I called out. He didn't move. I walked toward him. By the time I reached the clearing's edge, he wasn't there. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept feeling like someone was outside. Every creak, every gust of wind, made me jump. Around 3 a.m., I heard footsteps on the porch. Slow. Heavy. Then, nothing. I opened the door with a kitchen knife in hand. No one. But muddy footprints led down the steps and vanished halfway through the yard. I left the next morning. Whoever he was, I never saw him again. But part of me thinks he wasn't walking to the cabin. He was already there. Story 6, The Sound That Followed Me. My name is Corinne. I stayed in a remote forest cabin last year as part of a writing retreat. It was quiet. Peaceful. Almost too quiet. On the second night, I heard a sound in the woods. It was this rhythmic clicking. Not an animal. Not a machine. Almost like two stones being tapped together. It would start and stop at random intervals. Sometimes close. Sometimes far. Always the same pace. I tried to ignore it. But it started following me. If I went outside, it moved with me, always just beyond sight. One morning, I hiked to a nearby stream. Sat down to write. And there it was again. Click. 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 From across the water. I shouted. Nothing. When I got back to the cabin, I found small stones stacked on the front porch. A little pyramid. Deliberate. Every morning after that, new stacks appeared. Different shapes. Sometimes inside the cabin. I left after one showed up beside my bed. The clicking sound didn't stop when I drove away. It took 2 days before it finally went silent. I don't go into the woods anymore. Some things don't need an explanation. Sometimes, what you saw, or what you felt, is all the answer you'll ever get. Whether it was a sound you couldn't trace, a shadow that moved when it shouldn't have, or just the heavy silence pressing in on you, it stays with you. These stories remind us that there are places we're not supposed to be, and things we were never meant to understand. Stay safe. Stay aware. And if you ever find yourself alone in the woods, maybe think twice before stepping inside that cabin.